The long walk back from Sector 3B felt completely different from the walk toward it. When Jace and Riva first entered the forgotten part of the station, the air had been full of tension, fear, and a strange pull neither of them understood. Now there was silence. A calmer silence that felt like the station was finally breathing normally again. The emergency lights along the wall stopped flickering and returned to their soft, steady glow. Even the humming of the ventilation system sounded smoother, as if relieved that the broken core was finally gone. Riva leaned gently against Jace's side as they moved through the empty halls. Her steps were slow but steady, her glow gradually returning to its usual calm blue. She still felt weak, and every now and then she closed her eyes to steady herself, but the painful shaking had stopped. The invisible pull on her mind had vanished the moment the core collapsed. Even her breathing had become more relaxed, no longer sharp or strained. Jay kept one arm around her back, supporting her weight without making it obvious. He didn't want her to feel embarrassed or burdensome. To him, helping her felt natural. He had always liked working around different alien species on the station. But Riva had been special from the first week they became roommates. He admired her calm intelligence, her gentle curiosity, and the soft glow she brought to the room. Even on difficult days, tonight had only deepened that feeling as they reached the main hallway. A few technicians and students were already up and walking around, checking on the systems after the strange energy spike. Some people stared at Riva's crystal body, noticing that her glow was still unstable in small patches. Others noticed the faint dust covering Jace's clothes from the core's explosion. They didn't ask questions, maybe because emergencies on space stations weren't rare. Or maybe because the two of them looked too exhausted to explain anything. The medic they had seen earlier rushed over as soon as he spotted them. "You're back." "What happened?" The readings dropped suddenly. The pulses stopped. "Did you do something?" Riva opened her mouth to speak, but her voice came out weak. Jace answered instead. There was an old energy core in the sealed sector. It reactivated. It was resonating with her body. We shut it down. The medic stared at them with wide eyes. "You went into Sector 3B alone?" "That area's been off limits for decades." Jace shrugged tiredly. "We didn't have time to wait for approval." The medic looked at Riva again, scanning her quickly with a small handheld device. Her glow reflected softly on his equipment. "Your energy levels are improving. The strange resonance is fading. But you're exhausted. You both need rest." Riva nodded slowly. "Rest sounds good right now." Jace gently guided her back toward their dorm room. The medic offered to send a stretcher, but Riva refused. Not out of pride, but because she didn't want a crowd's attention. When they finally reached their door and stepped inside, the familiar quiet felt comforting. The room had always been peaceful at night, but tonight it felt like a safe place after a storm. Riva moved to sit on her bed, but her legs gave out slightly halfway. Jace steadied her with both hands, helping her lower into a sitting position. She let out a long breath, her glow brightening enough to show she was finally feeling safer. "You should lie down," he said softly. She gave him a small smile, a tired but genuine one. "Only if you lie down too." "You look worse than me," he chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Maybe a little." Riva tilted her head as she studied him. "You're covered in dust, and your hands are shaking. You need rest more than anyone." Jace sat on the edge of his bed across from hers. His muscles ached from the shockwave earlier, and his thoughts were hazy from the stress. But he didn't lie down yet. He wanted to make sure she was all right first. Riva leaned back on her pillow and let her eyes drift closed for a moment. When she opened them again, her glow dimmed into a softer, calmer hue. "The core was calling me," she whispered quietly. It felt like a voice without a sound. "It tried to pull me in, but you fought harder than it did." Jace looked down at his hands. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," she said firmly, her voice still soft, but more certain. "Humans say that often, but it isn't true. Most people freeze when they're afraid. But you moved. You protected me, and you didn't hesitate." Jace didn't know how to respond to that, so he stayed quiet. He looked up again when Riva shifted slightly on her. "Bed, there is something important you should." "No," she said. He nodded for her too. Continue Varelians anchor themselves to people they trust. When their minds are overwhelmed, when the first pulse hit, my body reacted without my control. I ended up on your bed. Because I felt safe near you. Jace's chest tightened with surprise. He remembered waking up to her trembling form, sitting on the edge of his mattress. At the time, he didn't understand why she was there. Now it made sense. You said it was instinct, he said softly. She nodded. Yes, and instincts don't lie. My body reached for you even before my mind understood what was happening. He swallowed lightly. He wasn't sure what to say. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable. But there was something warm in his chest he couldn't deny. Riva continued. Her voice shakier now, from weakness, but from emotion she rarely showed. When you stood between me and the core, something changed in me. I don't understand all human emotions yet, but I know this. When you acted, my glow reacted. You calmed the energy inside me, even when the core tried to pull me again. Jace stared at the floor, then slowly lifted his head. I didn't want anything bad to happen to you. I meant that. I still mean it. Her glow softened even more. You meant more to me tonight than you realize. Jace felt his face warm slightly. Riva, I just wanted to help. I didn't do anything special. She shook her head gently. You did more than you think. You saved me from losing control of my mind. You stopped the resonance. And you didn't let me face it alone. The room went quiet for a moment. Only the soft hum of the station filled the space. Riva shifted on her bed again, and then slowly sat up, though she still looked weak. She placed her feet on the floor, walked the small distance between their beds, and sat beside Jace on his mattress, her glow brushing softly against him like a warm light. She didn't get too close, but she chose the space beside him intentionally. You stayed calm, even when I couldn't, she said quietly. And now? I don't want to rest on the other side of the room. Jace blinked, surprised. Riva, you need to be comfortable. You should rest where you like. I feel more comfortable near you, she admitted. He didn't move away. He didn't know what their connection meant in Varelian culture. But he understood she wasn't asking for anything strange, only the comfort of presence. The reassurance of safety after a frightening event. You can stay here, he said softly. If it helps you rest. Riva leaned lightly against his shoulder, her glow warming his arm. It helps, she whispered. They sat like that for a while, not speaking, simply breathing in the calm that returned to the station. The darkness outside the window was deep, dotted with distant stars. The nebula in the distance shimmered softly, no longer vibrating from energy interference. Everything was quiet. Jace felt his eyes grow heavy. Riva's glow dimmed as she relaxed fully, leaning more of her weight against him. He shifted carefully so she wouldn't fall and gently guided her to lie down on his bed. She didn't resist. She settled comfortably, her glow stable and peaceful. Jace lay beside her, not too close, but close enough that she could feel his presence. When her eyes closed completely, she whispered one last soft sentence. Tonight changed everything. Jace, he looked at her, feeling the truth of those words settle in his chest. It did. She fell asleep soon after, her glow gently illuminating the room like a quiet star. Jace closed his eyes too. Knowing the danger was gone, the core destroyed, and Riva finally safe. And for the first time that night, both of them slept without fear. A human technician and a crystal-skinned alien, resting side by side, not because a machine forced them together, but because they found comfort in each other's presence. Whatever happened next in their lives, they both knew one thing for sure. The bond formed in that forgotten chamber wouldn't fade. It would only grow stronger. Evan Hale had traveled to many planets in his life, but Lysarenine felt different the moment he stepped onto its surface. The air smelled faintly of flowers, even though he saw no flowers anywhere. Strange blue fog drifted above the tall trees, and every few minutes the ground hummed softly, as if something deep below the surface was alive and breathing. He came here on a simple research mission to scan old ruins and collect plant samples. Nothing more. He was not expecting adventure, danger, or mysteries. He just wanted a quiet job after working too many months on crowded, human space stations. He spent the first hours walking through the forest, marking the path on his wrist device. Birds with shining wings flew above him, leaving trails of glowing dust. In any other situation, he would have stopped to watch them closely. But today, he wanted to finish the map as quickly as possible, so he could return to camp before sunset. The weather could change fast on LYS Era-9. As he walked deeper into the valley, he heard an unexpected sound. It was soft at first, almost like the wind brushing through leaves. Evan ignored it, assuming it was just the environment. But after a few more steps, he heard it again. Not wind, not an animal. It was something very human, a broken, trembling sound that carried emotion. Someone was crying. Evan stopped at once. He scanned the area, wondering if there were any human researchers nearby. His device showed no human signals within many kilometers. He slowly followed the sound, stepping carefully through the bushes. The crying grew clearer, filled with pain and fear. When he reached the edge of a small ridge, he saw her. An alien woman sat on the ground beside a cracked stone ledge. Her body was thin and delicate, her skin a pale shade with a soft silver glow. Her long hair fell over her shoulders like flowing strands of moonlight. She hugged her knees tightly and shook as she cried. Evan had never seen her species before. She was unlike any known life in the human database. He froze in surprise. He didn't want to frighten her, so he stayed at a distance and slowly raised his empty hands to show he meant no harm. The woman lifted her head. When her silver-bright eyes met his, she gasped and covered her mouth. Then, to his shock, she burst into louder sobs. Her hands shook, and she kept staring at him as if he was someone extremely important. Evan took a careful step forward. "It's okay," he said gently, even though she probably couldn't understand him. "I'm not here to hurt you." She whispered something rapidly in her own language, pointing at him with trembling fingers. Her voice broke again and again. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, something emotional. She looked at him as if she recognized him, even though he had never seen her before. Evan felt a pressure in his chest, confusion mixed with sympathy. He moved a little closer and kneeled on the ground to appear less intimidating. He kept his movements slow and calm. "I won't harm you," he repeated softly. She stared at him with watery eyes. Then, to his surprise, she reached out with shaking hands and gently grabbed his arm. Not in a forceful way. Not like someone attacking or holding him down. It was the touch of someone relieved after a long time of fear. Someone who finally saw something they had been searching for. Evan didn't know what she thought he was, but her desperation was clear. He slowly helped her stand. She winced when she put weight on her foot, and that's when he noticed a deep bruise along her ankle. She was injured. Maybe she fell from the ridge. He supported her carefully. She leaned against him, still whispering her own language with tears running down her face. Her voice was soft, full of emotion he couldn't understand. His temporary shelter wasn't far. He helped her walk step by step, guiding her through the forest. She held onto him tightly the entire way, as if she feared he would vanish if she let go. When they reached his sheltara, small dome tent with a portable energy field, he opened the entrance and brought her inside. She looked around with wide eyes, still breathing unevenly. Evan guided her to sit on a thick sleeping mat and handed her a small container of clean water. She stared at the water for a moment and then took a tiny sip, as if unsure whether she was allowed. When she saw he wasn't stopping her, she drank the rest slowly. A few more tears escaped her eyes, but her breathing calmed. Evan grabbed his medical scanner. Before using it, he raised it to show her it was safe. She nodded weakly. The scanner hummed as it analyzed her injury. The results showed a sprain and some exhaustion from dehydration. "Nothing life-threatening. You'll be okay," he said softly. She didn't understand the words, but she seemed relieved by his tone. After treating her ankle with a cooling gel, he placed a blanket around her shoulders. She relaxed a little, but her eyes never stopped watching him. Every time she blinked, tears returned. She whispered again in her language, repeating the same phrase. Evan wished he understood her, he decided to try something else. He activated his universal translator, a small device that could slowly learn unknown languages through repeated listening. He placed it near her, hoping it would start decoding her speech. When she saw the device, she leaned closer and spoke a few slow words. Her voice was still emotional, but calmer now. The translator blinked, showing it was processing. It would need more time. Evan sat near the entrance, giving her space. She kept glancing at him, as if fearing he might disappear if she looked away for too long. After a long silence, she finally spoke again. The translator caught a single word, though the meaning was incomplete. Return. Returned? You returned. Evan frowned. Returned. He had never been here before. Before he could ask anything, the sky outside suddenly darkened. Lyser 9's weather was unpredictable. Strong winds approached, shaking the shelter slightly. The alien woman looked frightened, pulling the blanket tighter. Evan closed the entrance flap and strengthened the energy field. The storm grew, rain falling in heavy sheets against the roof. The woman's eyes widened at the sound. She whispered again, more urgently. Evan sat a little closer, trying to soothe her. It's just weather, he said calmly. It will pass. She reached out and touched his wrist gently, speaking a long, emotional sentence. The translator only managed to decode fragments. Finally, human promise. You came. Evan had no idea what promise she was talking about, but the way she said it made his heart feel heavy. The storm lasted hours. During that time, she grew exhausted and finally fell asleep leaning against the blanket. Evan watched her breathe slowly, her face still marked with dried tears. Whatever she believed, it had affected her deeply. He stayed awake, checking the energy field and watching the forest outside. Something felt wrong. A strange heaviness filled the air. The translator beeped softly as it finished analyzing the first sample of her language. It displayed her name, Laeri. Evan looked at her sleeping face. She seemed peaceful for the first time since he found her. But when he opened the entrance just a little to check the forest, he noticed something alarming in the distance. The trees far away were glowing with a red shimmer, not natural, not weather. It looked like scanners sweeping the area. Something was searching for her. The storm hid the sound, but Evan focused his ears. Beneath the rain, he heard faint thumping, almost like heavy boots or large creatures. Moving together, he quietly closed the entrance again. He didn't know who these searchers were. He didn't know why they were looking for Laeri. He didn't know why she cried when she saw him, or why she believed he returned. But one thing he did know: if the people or creatures searching the forest found her in this weak state, she wouldn't survive. Laeri trusted him without knowing him. She held on to him as if he was the only safe thing in her world. He wasn't sure why, but he couldn't ignore that kind of trust. He looked at her once more. She slept with her hands lightly gripping the edge of the blanket, her breathing soft and tired. Evan made a quick decision. He wouldn't let anyone take her, not until he understood what danger she faced. And why a stranger from another world cried when she saw a human. He dimmed the shelter lights, activated silent mode, and prepared for whatever or whoever was coming through the forest next. Laeri woke slowly, blinking as soft morning light entered the shelter through the half-opened flap. Her silver eyes looked confused for a moment, as if she had forgotten where she was. Then she saw Evan sitting near the entrance, holding a small scanner and watching the forest outside with quiet focus. Her expression shifted from confusion to relief. She pulled the blanket closer and whispered a gentle word that the translator could not fully understand. What? But the tone clearly meant gratitude. Evan smiled a little. Good morning, he said softly. You were exhausted. She tilted her head, trying to understand his voice. The translator blinked as it attempted to process her language again. It was slow, but not useless. Laeri spoke a short phrase, and this time the device managed a clearer translation. Safe. With you? Evan's eyebrows lifted slightly. He didn't know how to respond, but her trust felt like a weight he didn't deserve. He handed her a cup of warm liquid, a basic nutrient drink he always carried. She sniffed it carefully, then took a delicate sip. Her body relaxed as the warmth spread through her. Outside, the forest was quiet, but not peaceful. Evan could still sense tension in the air, like the morning was holding its breath. And he had not forgotten the red scanning lights he saw during the storm. He didn't want to frighten Larry, but he needed information. He waited until she finished drinking before he gently spoke. Larry, last night, something was searching the forest. Were they looking for you? She froze. Her eyes widened with fear, and she held the blanket tighter around her. She whispered a long sentence, looking down at the ground. The translator processed her words slowly, breaking them apart. Hunters. Coming for me. Cannot let them. Find. Evan felt a chill. He scooted a little closer, but made sure not to overwhelm her. Why? Why are they after you? Larry hesitated. She reached for a small pouch tied around her waist, something Evan hadn't noticed before. She opened it and carefully pulled out a crystal-like object. It was shaped like a smooth stone, glowing with soft blue lines inside it. She held it with great care, almost like holding something alive. She spoke again, her voice soft but urgent. The translator worked hard to capture the meaning. This is memory. Of my people, our past. Our story, last of us. If it is lost, we are gone. Evan stared at the glowing object, feeling its importance even without understanding everything. They want it? Larry nodded quickly. They want. Shh, silence. They want no record. If they take this, no one will know we existed. Evan felt a heavy sadness settle over him. Entire species had gone extinct before. But to erase a whole history on purpose, it was cruel in a way that made his stomach tighten. Your people. Are they nearby? She shook her head slowly. Scattered. Hiding. Few left. Her eyes filled with tears again, and she whispered something that took the translator a moment to grasp. I ran, to keep memory safe, but I cannot run forever. Evan took a slow breath. Things were more serious than he thought. She wasn't just an injured traveler. She was carrying the last heartbeat of her culture. He didn't want to push her, but one question remained. Larry, yesterday when you saw me, why did you cry? She looked directly at him. Her expression was a mix of pain, hope, and something deeper, something old. She lifted one hand and pointed at the sky as if pointing far into space. She spoke very slowly, choosing each word carefully. The translator blinked, then delivered the translated message, long ago. Humans came. They saved us. They promised to return. When we needed help again, Evan's breath caught. Humans here. Larry nodded. Many generations ago, before I was born, before my mother was born, before her mother, it is a story, a legend. Her fingers trembled slightly. When I saw you, I thought, the promise came true. Evan didn't know what to say. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a savior. He was just an explorer on a routine mission. But to her, he meant something far greater. Before he could speak, a sudden clicking sound echoed outside. Larry stiffened instantly, gripping the memory crystal tightly. Evan motioned for her to stay quiet. He crawled to the entrance and peeked through a narrow gap. There were signs of movement, branches shifting, bushes trembling, a shadow sliding past the trees. Whatever or whoever was searching for her was getting closer. Evan quietly activated the shelter's camo field. From the outside, the shelter would now look like part of the forest floor. Not perfect protection, but better than nothing. He moved back to Larry, keeping his voice low. We need to move soon. Staying here isn't safe, she nodded, wiping her tears quickly. She tried to stand, but the moment she put weight on her injured ankle, her leg buckled. Evan caught her before she fell. Take it slow, he whispered. I'll help you. She leaned into his support as he packed essential supplies. He kept his movements quiet, listening carefully for any strange sounds outside. Once ready, he helped her step outside. The morning air was heavy with mist. Birds stayed silent. Even the ground seemed cautious beneath their feet. Larry gripped Evan's arm tightly. He guided her through a narrow path away from the shelter. Moving quickly, but carefully. After a few minutes, the silence was broken by a low mechanical hum. Evan pulled Larry behind a large tree. They crouched together as the sound grew louder. A flying machine glided above them. It was shaped like a dark metal wing, scanning the ground with red beams. Evan held Larry protectively, shielding her from view. The red light passed dangerously close, but the machine continued forward without detecting them. Larry closed her eyes, whispering a word that sounded like a prayer. The translator offered a small clue. Please. Protect. Ivan swallowed hard. He had not expected to become a shield for someone he met only yesterday. But something inside him refused to let her down. Once the machine moved far enough, they hurried deeper into the forest. Evan knew an old abandoned human outpost was located several kilometers away. If they could reach it, he might find tools or old communication devices. Maybe even a secure place to hide. But the journey was slow. Larry's injury made it difficult for her to walk, and Evan had to support almost all her weight. He didn't mind, but he worried they would be too slow to escape. After an hour of cautious travel, they reached a rocky slope. Evan helped Larry climb each step. She tried her best not to slow him, but he could feel her trembling from pain and fear. We're almost there, he whispered. She nodded, though her eyes were glassy with exhaustion. Then, without warning, the ground shook beneath them. Birds scattered into the sky. A deep roar echoed from the forest behind them. Larry's breath caught. Verathic, she whispered. The translator gave the full meaning. Hunters. Evan felt his pulse race. They're close. Larry held the memory crystal tightly to her chest, as if it were the only thing keeping her alive. Evan grabbed her hand. Come on. They moved faster now, though Larry's injury made every step painful. Evan half-carried her along the rocky path. Another roar echoed, closer this time. He didn't turn around to look. He didn't need to. The danger was coming by the time they reached the old outpost. Collapsed structure covered in vines. Larry was barely conscious. Evan brought her inside and gently laid her on a flat piece of debris. She breathed heavily, struggling to stay awake. Evan searched the old walls until he found a power box. He brushed dust away and activated it. The lights flickered weakly, but the system still worked. He rushed back to Larry. Stay with me. You're safe here. She opened her eyes and whispered something shaky. The translator managed the full sentence. I knew. Humans would return. Evan felt something tighten in his chest, something protective and determined. I'm here, he said firmly, and I'm not going anywhere. Outside, the forest shook again. The hunters had arrived, but Evan wasn't going to let them take her, not while he was still breathing. The abandoned outpost was quiet, but not peaceful. Every wall seemed to carry the memory of old human explorers who once lived there, leaving behind faded screens, broken machines, and empty containers covered in dust. Evan moved fast, checking if any of the forgotten equipment could still be useful. Larry lay on a metal platform, breathing hard. Her injured ankle had swollen more, and she held the memory crystal close to her chest, as if guarding it with her last strength. Evan crouched beside her. Larry, stay awake. I'm going to try something. She opened her eyes with difficulty. Her voice was weak, but the translator caught her meaning. I trust you. Those words felt heavy on Evan's shoulders, like he was carrying more than her safety. He was carrying the hope of her entire people. For a brief moment, he wondered why destiny had placed him here. He was an ordinary man doing an ordinary job. Yet now he stood between a gentle alien woman and a group of hunters. Determined to erase her kind, he squeezed her hand lightly before standing. He scanned the room again. A broken console flickered weakly, showing a grid of old defense systems. Some were beyond repair, but others seemed functional enough if he used them wisely. He took a breath. Okay, he whispered to himself. Let's make this place harder to attack. Outside, the forest rumbled. Heavy footsteps shook loose dust from the ceiling. The Verathic were large creatures. He had not seen them yet, but he could imagine from the sound alone that they were anything but friendly. Slow, powerful, patient hunters. Evan activated a motion shield around the main entrance. The device hummed weakly but held its shape. If something crossed it, he would know instantly. Next, he scanned the perimeter and found 2 portable energy barriers. He dragged them into position, creating narrow passages that would force the hunters into predictable paths. He didn't know how strong the Varathic were, but he knew humans were clever. Humans survived by thinking fast, adapting, and using whatever they had. As he worked, Larry watched him with tired eyes. She spoke softly, her voice trembling. "They will come. They do not stop." Evan turned to her. "Then I won't stop either." She blinked at him as if surprised by his certainty. "Why do you help?" He paused. There was no simple answer. He could have said he was doing his job, or he didn't want to see harm come to her, or he just couldn't walk away from someone who needed help. But deep inside, it was more than that. "I help," he said slowly, "because it's the right thing to do. Humans don't run away from people who need them." Larry stared at him and her eyes softened. She whispered something almost too quiet for the translator. "This is why the old legends said humans would return?" Before Evan could respond, the motion shield flashed red. Something had entered the outer perimeter. Evan rushed to the doorway and peered outside. Through the thick trees, he saw shapes, moving tall, armored figures with dark plates covering their bodies. Their steps made the ground vibrate. They carried long, spear-like devices that hummed with energy. The Varathic were terrifying in a silent, controlled way. They moved as if they already knew they would succeed. Evan's heart pounded. "They're here." Larry gasped softly and clutched the memory crystal tighter. Her face paled. Evan rushed back and knelt beside her. "Stay down. Don't move. I'll handle them." She shook her head weakly. "You cannot fight them alone." "I don't plan to fight," he said with a small smile. "I plan to outsmart them." For a moment, Larry looked at him with something like shock, then trust deepened in her eyes. Evan moved quickly, turning off all lights except dim emergency strips along the floor. He positioned himself behind a piece of broken machinery and watched the main entrance. The first Varathic stepped inside. The creature was massive, easily twice Evan's height, with armor that looked like it had been carved from dark stone. Its eyes glowed faintly, scanning the area. A cold silence followed it. It took slow steps, cautious but confident. It knew its prey was near. Evan remained still, waiting for the right moment. He remembered something from his old training. Don't fight stronger enemies head-on. Use their size against them. He waited until the Varathic stepped into the narrow passage he created earlier. When it reached the center, Evan activated the energy barrier. A powerful blue wall of light shot up. Trapping the hunter in the narrow space, the Varathic roared and struck the barrier, but it held for now. Evan didn't waste a second. He ran toward the second corridor, knowing more would follow. Larry watched with wide eyes, whispering something like a hopeful prayer. 2 more Varathic entered the outpost, scanning the shadows. Their heavy footsteps echoed like distant thunder. Evan hid behind a broken wall, breathing carefully. He pressed a button on his wrist device, activating small portable traps he had placed earlier. The ground near the hunters sparked, releasing bursts of electricity that made the creatures stumble. They didn't fall, but they were slowed. The third Varathic turned toward the sound of Larry's weak breathing. It seemed to sense her presence. Evan's heart froze. He couldn't wait any longer. He sprinted toward the creature and threw a metal pipe at a control panel. Sparks exploded from the wall, distracting the hunter just long enough for Evan to grab a piece of machinery and push it over. Blocking the path, the Varathic roared again, striking the barrier with its weapon. The blow left a crack in the metal. Evan knew it was only a matter of time before they broke through. He rushed back to Larry. Her hands shook as she tried to sit up. "They are too strong," she whispered. Evan gently held her shoulder. "I know, but I don't have to defeat them. I just have to give you enough time." She looked at him with confusion. "Time for what?" He pointed at the memory crystal. "For whatever that thing needs. You said it holds your people's history. Can it do more?" Larry stared at the glowing object as if remembering something important. "It can connect 2 old systems. It can send memory far. It can show truth to all." "Then do it," Evan said firmly. "Use the outpost systems." Make your history impossible to erase. Larry hesitated. But if I do, they will know. They will destroy everything. Oh, Evan said, shaking his head. Not if I buy you enough time. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. She touched the memory crystal to the outpost's broken console. The device lit up, glowing brighter than before. A massive wave of lights spread out, projecting images across the room, holograms of Larry's people, their past, their traditions, their homes. It was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. Larry whispered softly, Now, our story cannot be hidden. But the Varathic reacted immediately. The barriers cracked under their strength. The trapped hunter broke free, roaring with fury. Evan positioned himself between Larry and the advancing shadows. The outpost shook with each step the hunters made. Evan grabbed tools, old metal rods, anything he could use to slow them down. He wasn't a fighter. He knew that. But humans had survived all kinds of impossible situations by being persistent, unpredictable, and stubborn. He waited until the first Varathic drew close, then triggered a blast from an old energy coil. The explosion wasn't strong, but it blinded the creature temporarily. Evan lunged forward and pushed Larry's platform behind a heavy pillar. Shielding her from stray debris, the second hunter charged straight at him. Evan rolled aside just in time. He felt the wind of the creature's strike pass near him. He scrambled to his feet and grabbed a metal panel, using it as a makeshift barrier between himself and the creature. Come on, he muttered under his breath. Just hold out a little longer. The console behind him glowed brighter and brighter. Larry poured all her remaining strength into the memory crystal, sending waves of data through the outpost's network. The ancient system resisted at first, but finally accepted the connection and began broadcasting the memory. Across a wide range, the Varathic realized too late what she was doing. One of them let out a terrifying roar and lunged toward her. Evan moved without thinking. He jumped in front of the attack, blocking the way using the metal panel. The impact sent him flying backward, hitting the wall hard. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself to stand. He stumbled toward Larry again. She looked terrified, her hands trembling. You cannot protect me alone. Evan managed a weak smile. Watch me. The outpost lights flickered. The memory crystal released one final surge. A bright wave burst outward, filling the entire valley with radiant blue light. The Varathic roared in frustration. But it was over. Larry had succeeded. Her people's history was safe. The hunters backed away slowly. Realizing their mission had failed, they retreated into the forest, fading into the shadows. Evan collapsed beside Larry, breathing hard. She touched his face gently, her eyes filled with emotion. You saved everything, she whispered. He shook his head, exhausted but smiling. No, you did. She held the memory crystal against her heart and whispered softly. You returned. Just like the promise. Evan looked at her, confused but deeply moved. I don't know anything about a promise, but I'm glad I was here. Larry smiled through tears. You are. The promise. Evan didn't know what that meant yet, but he sensed the real answer would change everything.